Hey guys, what's up? This is Franklin from My Law Academy. If it's all the same to you, let's have some fun with first-degree murder. Most criminal law exams will require you to write analysis on 5 types of common law homicides: first-degree murder, felony murder, second-degree murder, voluntary manslaughter, and involuntary manslaughter. To perform well, you must know how all of the several pieces to homicide fit together and relate to one another in an analysis. To get us started, here's the big picture on first-degree murder. Broadly, homicide can be analyzed either under the common law or under the MPC, the Model Penal Code. Like manslaughter and second-degree murder, first-degree murder falls under the common law. So, first-degree murder is a common law concept, and it's defined as an unlawful killing with malice aforethought. The first step is to simply determine the actus reus, or the act of killing. The issue is simply this: did the defendant's action cause someone to die? So now let's move on to first-degree mens rea. Let's focus in on the key terms here, which are malice and aforethought. Let's look at malice. Malice is the first mens rea element for first-degree murder. Malice takes on different definitions for the 5 types of common law homicides. But for first-degree murder, malice is satisfied by establishing either that the defendant intended to kill or was substantially certain that death would occur. What you'll do is closely examine facts about the defendant to make arguments about whether they purposefully killed someone or had a pretty good idea that their actions would lead to someone's death. If so, then you've established malice. The next mens rea element for first-degree murder is aforethought. Aforethought is an English word meaning premeditation. You see, it's the prosecution's burden to show that the murder was willful, deliberate, and premeditated. Aforethought. But let me give you some butter for your bread. Here's a cool policy consideration. You see, the policy consideration behind premeditation is that defendants who act in cold blood are considered more dangerous and more deserving of punishment and more easily deterred by tougher sentencing because they actually consider their actions and the consequences of their actions before killing. Aside from merely addressing black-letter law on the exam, remember, quickly insert a bit of policy like this into your exam analysis and you'll earn a lot more points. When analyzing first-degree murder, premeditation is a wide open door to earning a lot of points because there are important arguments to make on both sides, and each argument has a seminal case to reference. Listen, you see, the prosecution has the burden to prove that the defendant premeditated the murder in order to convince the jury to convict the defendant of first-degree murder, which carries the toughest sentence. On the other hand, the defendant makes arguments to show that the prosecution has failed to meet its burden and they didn't plan or premeditate the killing at all. You can see these arguments are on 2 polar ends, but when making them, it's best to reference the 2 most defining or seminal cases on either end of premeditation. The first case is Commonwealth v. Carroll, and the second case is State v. Guthrie. Under the Carroll approach, no time is too short for a wicked man to frame his mind on the scheme of murder. This is a prosecutor's dream case because it sets such a low bar for premeditation that even if a defendant had only a split second to reflect on their act while immediately pulling the trigger, that brief moment still amounts to sufficient premeditation under the Carroll approach. Under the Guthrie approach, a decent amount of reflection is actually required. The defendant must have had some period of time between the development of the intent or the idea to kill and the actual killing itself. The increase in the span of time between what Guthrie requires and what Carroll doesn't require is to help assure that the act or homicide was premeditated and deliberate rather than impulsive. Essentially, premeditation is easy to satisfy under Carroll, but more rigorous to satisfy under Guthrie. So, in your analysis, use Guthrie as a counter-argument to Carroll, and to support that the defendant may not have had enough time to premeditate the murder. Also, to help strengthen the counter-argument, use a case called Anderson. Anderson went a lot further than Guthrie and looked at facts regarding whether the defendant's behavior prior to the killing might indicate a more deliberate design or plan. Anderson considers three factors, really. The first part of the analysis is where you discuss whether or not an activity was planned. Another factor examined under Anderson is whether the defendant's prior relationship with the victim might indicate a reason or a motive to kill. This is the motive factor in the Anderson analysis, so be sure to be on the lookout for facts where the analysis can be made. The last factor considered under Anderson is any evidence of the manner of killing being so particular, so exacting, that there's no way the defendant could have committed this murder without a preconceived design. So that's first-degree murder under the common law. Start with whether there was an act of killing. Then, discuss whether there was malice. Next, argue both sides of premeditation from the perspective of the prosecution versus the defendant, and referencing important cases like Carroll, Guthrie, and Anderson. So listen, that's first-degree murder. I'm leaving the rest up to you. Just be sure to get lots of exam practice.